There was a big shakeup in the afternoons over on 97.5 the Fanatic. Now, if you remember, we talked about when Tyrone Johnson got let go from the Fanatic and the best show ever, which was the dumbest fucking name in the history of Philadelphia sports shows, a genuinely stupid name, and they added a question mark to it, which the resounding response was no, not the best show ever. When Tyrone got let go, the question was, all right, well, who's going to replace him? And we talked about the fact that like Josh Innes was talking about putting in for the job, but he never felt like he actually had a shot at it, and that maybe they already kind of had it preordained in their mind who they were going to hand that job off to. And I said at the time that like the least rock the boat kind of move would have been to take Mike Missinelli from the middays and push him into the afternoons where he had been for a good long time if he were willing to make that move. And ultimately, like, I don't know if he was. I don't know if they broached the subject with him or not. But I thought that, like, all right, they might just shift Missinelli. And I thought what they could do was have either Salchunas move off the morning, or they would have Bill Colarulo kind of take the lead chair on the midday show. It's like, all right, if you do that, you're giving one of those two guys, or maybe put them together, you're giving those guys additional seasoning while Missinelli kind of like holds down the afternoons. And then for once, the Fanatic could maybe have a pipeline to the next person that's going to take over the afternoon. But what we ended up finding out is that, well, no, Salchunas is remaining in the morning. Colarulo is now moving to the afternoons, and he went to Twitter, X, and he talked about what the show is going to be. So we're going to roll this one out real quick. So Bill Colarulo, who some of you may be aware of, like 2 years ago was a lawyer, made a hell of a pivot. I think he was working over at Jacob Sports. He was working at the Jacob Media thing, and he's figured out a way to work his way up, and the guy works hard. He has figured out a way to work his way from being a lawyer to being a radio host, to being the foil of sorts for Missinelli in the middays, to now being on this afternoon show, which is also going to keep Ricky Bottalico. Ricky Bo, I think, is the last person remaining, right? Because there was Jen Scordo, there was Tyrone, there was Broads. I think Ricky Bo's the last one from the former best show ever afternoon show. But we'll throw it out to Bill. Let's hear what Bill has to say. The show is now called Unfiltered. Let him make his pitch. This is his sales pitch to each and every one of you that listen to shows on the radio in the afternoons.
What's up, everybody? Big news. If you haven't heard, we are launching a brand new
Strong bicep game here, by the way. It's a very good look for him. It's a very smart call. The polo shirt, the biceps. Good job, Bill.
Afternoon show on 97.5 the Fanatic and NBC Sports Philadelphia. Unfiltered with Ricky Bo and Bill Colarulo. Anyone who's followed me knows this has been quite the journey, and I am super excited now to be able to team up in Afternoon Drive with former Philadelphia Philly, former Major League Baseball All-Star, Ricky Bottalico, and it's going to be produced by the one and only Silvana Kelleher. Listen, I know you have a...
So before he gets into the elevator pitch of why you should listen to the afternoon show, I saw Kincaid at Crossing Broad wrote a whole thing about, like, what does it mean for the local Philadelphia sports talk ecosystem that a guy can go from being an attorney 2 years ago to being the afternoon drive host. I'm going to let him make the elevator pitch, and I'll give you my thoughts.
A lot of options for where you can go for your sports talk. I know you may even have some preconceived notions about what Philadelphia sports talk is. That's not what this show is going to be about.
That is going to be hard to follow through on. We're going to get there in a second. The preconceived notion is that you have to talk about the Eagles all the time. But again, we're going to hear this out. I'll give me my thoughts. Okay.
Calling it Unfiltered because that's exactly what it's going to be. There's not going to be the lazy hot takes, the lazy fake trade scenarios, the ridiculous conversations that nobody cares about. No, we're going to provide the sports talk that you want to hear. And anyone who knows me knows I put a lot of time in research because I want to back up my opinions with evidence and facts. And if you know Ricky Bottalico, he's going to be able to...
Well, he's an attorney, so evidence and facts makes a lot of sense, so we're fine there.
Bring that wealth of experience, having played here in this city at the highest level. This is going to be a great show. We're going to have a lot of fun, but we're also going to provide a lot of value when it comes to sports talk. Check it out starting Monday, June 9th, every single weekday, 2 to 6 p.m. on 97.5 The Fanatic and on NBC Sports Philadelphia. I can't wait. Hope you join us.
All right, so let me break this thing down for you really quick. And you guys can let me know in the comments what you think on YouTube, Facebook, and X. I like the name Unfiltered. I think that Colarulo and Ricky Bo are going to have really good chemistry. I think it's going to be a solid show. Here's the problem, because there is a glaring problem. And it's not with him and with Ricky Bo. It's not that. And it's not with the requisite level of talent. It is not that. Radio hosts are measured by Nielsen ratings. Nielsen is a very flawed system that we've talked about on this show. We used to talk about way back when on Crossing Broadcast about the limited number of people with meters and how that metering system is in a large way responsible for people's careers, for their jobs, for their standing on the radio, which also includes bonuses. You have a finite number of people who have legitimately a meter that they tune their station to, and that is supposed to be reflective of people in that age demographic and area of whatever listening, terrestrial listening zone, right? So it's not a one-to-one thing where you get in your car, you turn on 97.5 The Fanatic, and then Nielsen gets pinged that Ford is listening to The Fanatic, but then K-Dub 1323 is listening to WIP, while Zacho is listening to Alt 104.5, and Chris Freed is listening to a podcast. There's not a one-to-one way to do that. Now, in theory, they can try to surmise that with streaming numbers. There's a little bit more of a science to that. But the actual over-the-air ratings are measured on these dumbass meters with a finite number of people. And again, jobs are dictated and determined by this. Like, that's why to me, the whole system is flawed. But this is how it has existed for a long time. So here's your problem, right? There are very few things that you can do in this city to get a high rating. You can't talk about Flyers draft pick options in afternoon drive consistently and try to beat the juggernaut that is Ike and Spike and Fritz in the afternoons on WIP. You cannot try to beat WIP at their own game by only talking Eagles when WIP has the rights to the team and therefore has, like, I think, first right of refusal or maybe even exclusive rights to having the coach and the active players on the roster on the show. So you can't run head to head in the same way with having those people on. You can't do a full pivot and say, well, if WIP is going to talk about the Eagles and all Eagles all the time, even when Eagle season isn't going on, we're going to talk about the other teams. That stupid little Nielsen thing, those stupid old meters, that stupid system of evaluating, that could cost somebody their job. So it's a very, very hard thing to work out. I fundamentally would like to believe that if the Fanatic did try to pivot and do something fundamentally different, and maybe that's a combination, maybe that's a fusion of the local sports and some national sports, and just like entertainment in its entirety, that might be more of a winning formula than what they've had so far. Because again, I don't like to belabor the point. WIP's morning show is an absolute juggernaut. It was when Angelo Cataldi was there. It's remained a juggernaut since he's left. Their lead-in into the midday show is gigantic, right? They leave the air and hand it off to Giglio and Hugh Douglas with a huge lead over what the Fanatics morning show is able to hand to the midday show. Now, will Missinelli, without Colarulo on his show, somehow be able to, I can't imagine that people were not listening to the midday show because they didn't like Colarulo. I cannot envision that's the thing. So is there going to be a midday bump now if it's just Missinelli? Like, I don't think so. If somehow that does happen, all right, are you then handing a stronger lead in theory to the afternoon? I guess. But like, when that number remains consistent and when people are tuned into one station and they just let that shit ride all day, you have to give them a reason to turn the dial. Now, in fairness, changing the afternoon show might drum up interest. And like Colarulo and Ricky Bo are going to have one real shot at this, right? And for better or worse, it's happening June 9th. The Sixers aren't in the finals, right? The Flyers aren't in the Stanley Cup final. The Phillies are kind of floundering again. The Union are in first. But like, there's not a lot to draw people in. And so it's a hard time to start a new show. And I do wish them the best. And I think, again, like the actual quality of the show is probably going to be high. But how do you get people to change their habits? How do you get people to change off of the station they've been listening to all day or they've been tuned into all day? And is there a way? And do you give them a reason? There are things, I will once again bang the table. There are things that the Fanatic could be doing right now that are not particularly hard, that are not particularly complicated, that would significantly improve their reach, especially with the demographic they're trying to reach. They still haven't done it. I don't know what the fuck they're doing. But there are things that the Fanatic could be doing right now that like I see plain as day, and then I have talked to a few people who are no longer on the radio but are still involved in media. We all say the same thing to each other. Maybe Bill will figure it, like maybe Bill knows, and now maybe that Bill takes that job in the afternoon. Maybe he'll have some more influence. I have to imagine somebody is going to realize the very clear low-hanging fruit that they have available to them that they have still failed to execute. We'll see if they do. But all the best to them. All the best to the afternoon show because it is interesting.